Long ago, during the ancient year of 2025, I went to Universal Studios Hollywood for opening night of the inaugural FanFest Nights event. Despite somewhat limited information that suggested that Universal themselves weren't quite sure of what FanFest was, I went that first night out of curiosity and an interest in how operations and attractions might evolve over the lifetime of this event. I walked away pleasantly surprised. I was most impressed with the Hill Valley experience from Back to the Future, and the other walkthroughs and shows demonstrated a promising start for what could become a rival to longtime mainstay Halloween Horror Nights. Over the past few months, we've seen a bit of a time loop as Universal once again drip-fed information to the extent that early access attractions still were not known until early access started on the first night. I arrived at Universal Hollywood right before the early access time of 6 p.m. During early access, there are 3 available attractions: a Sailor Moon movie, a Dungeons & Dragons walkthrough, and a Jurassic World exhibit. I figured the latter 2 could be done later, and since Dungeons & Dragons was all the way down in the lower lot, I made the trek down there. I went down the Starway, passing the soon-to-open Fast and Furious coaster, and walked towards the Transformers ride. The entrance to the walkthrough was just past here. I got in line for Dungeons & Dragons at 6:15 with a posted wait time of 10 minutes and got in around 6:37. I immediately noticed that compared to last year, the queue was a little more sparse, with none of the fun illuminated signs for each class on the exterior wall. I assume that's to do with a different queuing process this year, but it was still a nice detail when it was there. It's a cute show, but if you saw it last year, there isn't really anything different this time. The animatronics are still phenomenal and the lighting is still great, but there are still the same sound problems as last year, with heavy bleed-through from other rooms being a big distraction, especially in the first room where a high elf or something was giving us the opening spiel. I mentioned the class thing from last year, which is gone this time, although the actors still constantly refer to different classes within the group, despite their never having been assigned to us. It was almost as if we were just supposed to pick our own. I finished the walkthrough at around 6:50 and made my way back up to the lower lot, because the first One Piece stunt show was scheduled for 8:30, and the overwhelming number of One Piece cosplayers at the event suggested that show would be a big hit. On my way up, I passed the Sailor Moon movie with a 10-minute wait time and popped in line at 7:03. The pre-show, which is dubbed, ran at 7:13 and is about 4 minutes long. The show itself, which is subbed, started at 7:21. It's fun, it's inoffensive, and it's pretty cute, even if the title, Pretty Guardian Sailor Moon: The Miracle Moon Palace Chapter Deluxe, is an unforgivable atrocity. I am unfamiliar with this current iteration of Sailor Moon, but I still could understand what was going on and who was who. Chair effects were minimal, and there were lots of 3D gimmick shots that didn't play well in 2D. The walls flanking the screens didn't have a ton of projection effects, but the team did a great job as far as the source material was concerned. Sailor Moon let out at 7:35, so I promptly headed to the Waterworld queue area to wait the near hour before the stunt show started, and even then it was pretty packed. I had a solid place in the corral area of the queue, where you're herded like cattle to their death, but once they seated us, there was really only one section available on the very far side. I ended up sitting in the upper corner, which wasn't a bad spot, but giving priority seating to the VIP and express customers, of which there are many, caused a bit of a snafu for some of the hoi polloi who didn't get there early enough. Since there are only 3 shows a night, it's recommended to arrive at least an hour early, if not more. I was seated by 8:20 for the show itself. It was pretty good. There was a lot of cool choreo mixed in with the stunt work, and it seemed like the actors were doing a serviceable job for their characters. I've never seen One Piece, but the crowd seemed to love it, with lots of fan service that got big applause.
Target browse! Don't get distracted! Zoro! You finally made it!
There are also lots of jokes and gags that played well, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't have a hard time following who was who, like if the Krusty the Clown pirate is good or evil, although by the end I figured it out. He's both, right? The sound design was really well done and the lighting was gorgeous, especially the neon trim of the speedboats and the jungle green canopy effect. All in all, it was very cool, even if it was missing that Waterworld plane. After One Piece let out, it was 8:50 and I wanted to check out the anchor attraction of the night, Scooby-Doo Meets the Universal Monsters, Mystery on the Backlot. I got in line at 9:03 and my tram boarded at 9:30 and then unloaded at 9:45. In the wake of losing the Hill Valley Experience, which was a perfect anchor show that had no real plot, but instead had more of a block party atmosphere, we get a bizarre mashup that has simultaneously too much and not enough going on. Located on a film set in the Little Europe section of the backlot, we're introduced to 4 suspects and the mystery villain, who's unleashed the Universal monsters on the backlot to sow chaos. Enter the Mystery Inc. team, who recruits us to help solve the mystery. Once the tram gets you to Little Europe, you're pretty much dumped out and handed a cute little clue book that has information on the suspects and where to go. The mystery aspect of the experience was well done and very well thought out, but the execution felt oddly lackluster. Like Hill Valley, this is a self-guided experience, so once you're out of the tram, you're free to walk at your own pace and gather clues in the order you see fit. However, this created a lot of bottlenecks in Little Europe, which isn't nearly as wide open as the Courthouse Square set, and the experience of gathering clues was more like standing in a big crowd trying to get a glimpse of something. The set design of the backlot was well done, but a lot of the set dressing and facades only exist to serve as clues themselves, which makes them feel at once too special and not special at all, if that makes any sense. The lighting is impressive, and the backlot setting is a clever way to lampshade all of the grip rigging and wires festooning the space. Once you've gathered all of your clues and you're sure you know who did it, you wait in a line for the big reveal, which is curiously located right next to the tram return load area, so if you time it right, you can hear who did it and jump right on your tram back. Those of us in line suffered a similar problem to D&D, where the sound bleed from the reveal stage caused us all to hear who did it before we got a chance to see the scene play out ourselves. It's not a big deal because it really doesn't matter. What's most bizarre about this experience is the dissonance between having a job to do but with no real goal or purpose. In D&D or Star Trek, this wasn't a big deal because you were being whisked between show scenes and observing a naturally progressing story. Here, you're just left to your own devices and don't really get much out of it. It's fun to see the Scooby team meeting guests and the monsters mingling about, but the actors didn't seem to have any direction, especially the monsters, who were wreaking havoc on the backlot by taking pictures with guests and shaking hands with little kids. The actors themselves are all great, and the pre-recorded Scooby team actors do a really good job of capturing their respective characters. I was done with this experience at 10:30, and then I made my way back down to the lower lot. My next stop was Nintendo World, which I wasn't too excited about given the annoying scavenger hunt they did last year, but this year was a little better. There was another game to play and a choice of color Yoshi headband to grab. I got purple, but the game itself is more of a take the circled letters and unjumble them thing that took me about 2 minutes, which was much more preferable to standing in a series of long lines to get a series of stickers that afforded me a meet and greet with Yoshi. That is still the ultimate prize here, a picture with Mario and green Yoshi. But if you don't want that, they'll give you the sticker anyway, and there are other multicolored Yoshis doing meet and greets this time. I think this was a great refinement of the Nintendo World FanFest experience, and I had a nice time walking around the land while it wasn't completely packed with people. All in all, I spent about 10 minutes inside of Super Nintendo World and accomplished everything I wanted to. On the way out of the lower lot around 11:05, I passed the Jurassic World Through the Eras exhibit, a really cool little outdoor museum featuring vehicles and models from all of the Jurassic movies. As a JP3 lover, I was delighted to see the Spinosaurus, which has a cute little Easter egg with the cell ringer in its belly. The walk-around characters here were really fun and purely from the first movie, with Nedry yelling at Hammond from across the exhibit being a nice touch. The guy playing Ian Malcolm was funny because he seemed more like a Jeff Goldblum impersonator who just showed up, and the Henry Wu actor needed a little more love, but I really appreciated the effort they put into this. My final stop for the night was the Harry Potter walkthrough Search for the Hippogriff. I got in this line at 11:25, tired and starving, but with a 45-minute posted wait, I figured this was the home stretch. How wrong I was. The line moved at a snail's pace. It was so bad that large swaths of people were leaving during the time I stood in line. I finally got in at 12:22, almost an hour wait, which isn't bad for what they posted, but still felt much longer. The setup is pretty simple. You're in the Forbidden Forest where a Hogwarts professor has asked you to help them find and rescue a hippogriff named Fleetwing, who's in some kind of danger. There are a few impressive creature puppets on your journey through the forest, along with some really nice lighting and a couple of cool effects, but I don't think this is worth an hour wait. The hippogriff animatronic at the finale is pretty impressive, although it's a little jerky. The MC we had to guide us did a great job, especially with keeping the younger kids engaged with what was kind of a nonsense plot. By the time I was done with Harry Potter, it was 12:35 and I was ready to go home. FanFest Nights is a weird beast. It's in its second year, still in its infancy, and so it makes sense that the properties that they have on display might reflect that kind of clout. In 10 or 15 years, this may be the kind of event that draws even bigger fandoms, but right now there seems to be a lack of any real identity that helps set this event apart. There are attractions, but not so many that you can't see everything in a single night. There are hangout areas, but they're limited in number, and there's not much to draw people into those if they themselves are expected to be the main draw. I know it's not very helpful to keep bringing this up, but they really did nail it that first year with Hill Valley. They took a popular Universal property with a special tie to the real-world space. They let fans loose on it, along with tons of characters from the movie, and they had food and music and dancing and carnival games and shopping, and it felt magical. I think that they had a nice stab at continuing some of that with Scooby-Doo, especially taking advantage of the backlot's history. But the mission-oriented nature of that experience didn't lend itself to any sort of relaxed hangout vibe. Of course, there were logistical problems with Hill Valley, namely crowds getting so big that tram service would occasionally be disrupted, but there are ways around this. Hell, there is a massive plaza in the upper lot that was designed for events like these, but was sitting unused and dark the entire night. Why not have a one-piece hangout zone that matches that Hill Valley experience, or Sailor Moon or whatever else? It's odd that the closest we actually got to this spirit was the Jurassic Park exhibit, which is so tucked away that passing guests may miss it entirely. Overall, I was pleased with FanFest Nights Part 2, although several operational inefficiencies were evident, especially with regards to the Harry Potter and One Piece queuing systems, as well as the Sanji's Galley restaurant, which had a line snaking all along the Waterworld Show Plaza when I arrived, and still snaked down the side of the restaurant when I was leaving at 12:40. I think that next year there needs to be a real reevaluation of the properties on display, their respective attractions, and how they're integrated into the space. For now, it seems like just another distraction for locals, but with enough time and care, this could be a huge hit for Universal. A 1 out of 10.